Hey everyone, it's Mike Hamber at FlipNerd.com. Welcome back for this episode of the FlipNerd.com Expert Interview Show, where I meet with experts from across the real estate investing industry, and you get a chance to be a fly on the wall and listen to what we're talking about here. Today's going to be a great show. It's episode number 302, and my guest is Lex Levinrad. Lex has been on the show before. It's actually almost 200 episodes ago. Hard to believe. But Lex is a successful Florida investor, a mentor, and a coach. He's the founder and CEO of the Distressed Real Estate Institute, where he trains other investors. And today, that's what he's going to largely do. He's going to train you if you're listening in. I've always had a lot of respect for Florida real estate investors that not only survived, but thrived after the crash. It really says a lot about, what you're capable of. And there really are a lot of ups and downs in real estate investing. And your success as an investor is determined by your ability to kind of anticipate changing markets and to perform well in both up and down markets. There, when you hear new people talking about, well, I'm going to get in after the market goes down, or I want to wait till the market comes back up. That's not really looking at it with a business mindset. It's very closed-minded. There are ways to make money in both markets. So the only thing that's certain in this industry is change. And Lex is going to talk about it with us today. For those of you that have been listening to our show for a while, we've now broken the show up into two parts. We're going to jump into the kind of fundamentals of what Lex does and some of the fundamentals of real estate investing with wholesaling and rehabbing, and talk some about that. And in the part two of our show, the Taking Action segment, Lex is going to share some practical advice and some real great tips on how to achieve the success you're looking for. Lex, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mike.
Great to have you.
Likewise, great to be here.
Yeah. So for those that don't know you, I know, it's funny, we actually have two shows. I don't really talk a whole lot about it. We have this expert interview show, and then we have the REI Classroom, which we publish 7 shows a week, one every day. And I know you contribute some content over there. So for anybody that's listening to this and they're not watching the REI Classroom, check that out. But we appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And if somebody hasn't heard you on one of our shows before and isn't aware of you, why don't you take a couple minutes to tell us about you and who you are and what you do?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, I'm the founder of the Distressed Real Estate Institute, and I teach investors from all over the country. In fact, quite a few from outside of the U.S., how to flip houses, how to wholesale, fix and flip properties, fix and rent properties. And that's what we do. We've been doing this right here in Florida since 2003. We've got students all over the country now. Just last week, we had a student from Biloxi, Mississippi, and Grand Rapids, Michigan, flipping houses, teaching people how to make money wholesaling and flipping.
Yep. And I bet that guy from Michigan was not nearly as tan as you, my friend. I know you do a lot of boating and stuff. So yeah,
I do.
That's great. Really, it's interesting to talk to people in other geographies about what's going on in their market. But I've always thought that maybe 75% of real estate investing is kind of universal, right? Just the fundamentals of how to do certain things, how you talk with sellers, how you generate leads, how you raise money. There's a lot of things that are really kind of that the geography doesn't matter, right?
Right. Well, I think, a lot of people come to me and they say, well, Lex, the market's great right now, but if the market gets too hot, then how do you wholesale? I say, well, listen, if a house is a deal, if a house is worth $100,000, you can buy it for $60,000. It's a deal. If the same house goes up to $500,000 and you can buy it for $300,000, it's still a deal. So, wholesaling is just about finding deals and flipping them and buying below market. So,
right.
It changes with the market going up and the market going down, but the concepts are the same, and there might be geographic differences like basements in one area and not having in another, or construction types, or
right.
or heating elements and things of that nature. But real estate's real estate. A deal's a deal,
Yeah. And there's always, talk a little bit maybe about finding, in terms of finding deals and how that differs by geography, because like in Florida, obviously there was a much bigger downturn than some other parts of the country. And there was a lot of REO activity, a lot of short sale activity. In other parts there weren't. But aside from those kind of market conditions, there's always kind of situational issues that never leave, right? Death, divorce, inheritance, lots of sellers that have situational issues that those things are never going to change regardless of a market.
Exactly. And there's also situations that occur where you're not expecting them. For example, I got into real estate in 2003 Just moved from Los Angeles. I've been in Los Angeles 12 years. I came to Florida. Didn't really know anything about Florida, the geography, or anything. And then the following year, 2004, we got hit with Hurricane Francis. And then we got hit again with a hurricane in '05 and again with another hurricane in '06. And I thought,
Right.
every year there's a hurricane. And people said, no, we haven't had one for 15 years. So that created a real opportunity because all these people up in St. Lucie County, every single house had a damaged roof with a blue top on it. And FEMA was putting, they declared a state of emergency. They put these FEMA trailers. So it was a fantastic opportunity to go and say, hey, your house is worth $100,000, probably needs about 40 in work, and you owe 60 to the bank. So how about you just sell me the house and I'll just take over your mortgage? And that's how we got started. So yeah, there's situational opportunities. My student in Biloxi, Mississippi tapped in big time on that when, it was pretty hard, to move a property in Biloxi and Gulfport and areas like that. And he made an absolute killing. In 2.5 years, he bought 44 properties and increased his net worth by like $1.7 million just by tapping into a situation where people were running away and you could really pick up bargains super, super cheap.
Yeah, and there's really two ways to look at that. Some people are like, you hear this as an investor, people are like, oh, you're taking advantage of people. And it's like, well, look, somebody has to pick up those pieces. We would never advocate, and I know you wouldn't, taking advantage of anyone. You're taking advantage of the situation from a business standpoint, no different than, Home Depot is going to have more sales of lumber to rebuild those areas and things like that. And
sure.
A lot of times people just want to walk away, right? They're like, hey, it may cost you 40 to rehab that house, but it may cost them 60 or 80. And they're like, look, I just take the insurance money or take nothing or whatever and walk away. And I'm just going to start over because it makes my life a lot easier than having to deal with this, right?
Yeah. Well, when I started in the business, the guy that trained me, I worked under him for 2 years, him and his partner. And my very first deal that I got was a lady who was on dialysis. And I said to him, look, I can't buy this house. I feel terrible taking advantage. And about a month later, the house went into foreclosure and was sold at the courthouse. And he called me in and said, listen, do you recognize this address? And I said, yes. He said, okay, so look at the guy who bought it and what he paid for it. They lost the house either way. So in other words,
yeah,
they're already in foreclosure. They're going to lose the house. Someone's going to buy it. It may as well be you.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities in damaged properties and in foreclosures, and they do ebb and flow, but real estate's real estate.
Sure. Well, let's kind of dive into talking about some of the fundamentals of real estate and some of the things that you teach. I know you teach people how to wholesale and rehabbing, and kind of, those are obviously the two main exit strategies, right? Do you want to kind of maybe talk a little bit more about why investors would choose, a lot of new investors, and we have a lot of veteran folks that listen to the show too, so I don't want to focus just on new, but a lot of people have the mindset of, I'm going to start with wholesaling. But I think we would probably agree that not every deal can be wholesaled. Sometimes you can't get it deep enough, but you could still make plenty of money if you rehab it. There's some great reasons why you need to have multiple exit strategies kind of in your toolbox, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And also, we do a lot of rentals in addition to rehabs and wholesaling. Yeah. And when we started out, we were purely just buying, fixing, and renting. And then we went from there into fixing and flipping. And then from there, we went into wholesaling, primarily because we got sick and tired of paying the premiums to get properties from the wholesalers. But the thing is that I think wholesaling is a great entry point for new investors for a number of reasons. First of all, because in order to get into a fix and flip or rental, you have to have some kind of cash, or you have to borrow money, even if it's a hard money loan.
Right.
And I don't like new investors when they're not really sure what they're doing to start signing, contracts with big zeros on them if they're not really 100% sure what they're doing. So what's great about wholesaling is that if you think you got a great deal and then you try and sell it to someone like me or you, and the investor who's a big buyer who buys 10, 20 houses a month says, no, I'm not interested in that house, that's a great way for a new investor to learn and say, how come he doesn't want that house? Maybe they missed something. Maybe they thought the house is worth more than it is, or maybe the house needed more work than they initially expected. So if a person learning how to wholesale can learn how to find a deal, that's really the key. That's the hardest part, because once you found a deal, hey, you can fix and flip the house, you can wholesale the house, you can keep it as a rental, you can sell it with a lease option, you can do whatever you want, but it's all predicated on finding a deal to begin with. So I believe that that's where every investor should start, is looking for deals.
I agree.
In my case, working with these two guys that trained me, I was essentially their bird dog, and they paid me a $5,000 finder's fee on any property that I brought to them that they ended up buying. So it's a great way for you to learn different areas, price points, and what we call a deal from a dud, basically.
Right. And I think you would agree with me on this too. Even if you're not a rehabber, even if you're primarily just wholesaling, you need to know how to evaluate a property like a rehabber, because that's who you're selling it to, right? So we've all seen the guy that's could be a woman, but usually it's a guy, that's wholesaling a property, and they're like, oh, it's rehab, $6 a square foot. And they just make up some number, and you're like, no, you haven't even looked at this house. You don't really understand how to evaluate it, because they don't rehab. But I think it's really important that they think like a rehabber, because that's who they're going to be selling to, most likely, right?
Right. That's very important. I mean, that's really key, because, our buyers are primarily either people that are buying to fix and flip, and many times they're selling to first-time home buyers, or they're buying to fix and rent, which means usually they're looking for some cash flow. So on the landlords, they're looking for cash flow. They want to buy a house for a cheap price that's got the highest return. So often you're looking at like lower income kind of neighborhoods, cheaper price housing. For those that want to fix and flip, their strategy is to get exit out of their property as quick as possible. They want to sell to their first-time home buyer with an FHA loan. So, FHA loan limits is also, once again, lower priced housing. So the vast majority of what we sell is either rehab or landlords, and they're both looking for lower price inventory. So a lot of beginners make a mistake of not understanding that concept. And, when you're talking to the rehab on the phone who buys 5 houses a month, he says how much in repairs. You can't say, well, I don't know. You've got to be able to tell him a number. So you have to have an understanding of what it would cost to fix up a house, labor, material, etc. That's very, very key.
Yeah, I know. I could give personally some experience early on. If I bought a house really well, and I'm like, wow, I'm really happy that I'm going to make this amount of money, and if I can sell it for that, I'm going to do well, without thinking of, without just being green, then not having enough experience. I mean, my first 2 houses I bought, one I wholesaled and one I rehabbed, and but the first one, I remember somebody telling me on a couple of my first wholesale deals that, because I've always bought very conservatively, and which is good and bad, but it's good because you stay safe. But what I saw happen a couple times is people said, yeah, you gave me an estimate on the repairs, and man, I got it done for like $8,000 cheaper than that. Or it's like, okay, well, I left some money on the table. So if you don't know, you have to think like your end buyer, right, or your end user. If it's a rental property, one of the things that's changed, that's been really interesting over the past couple of years that I've seen in where I operate, and a lot of the people that I work with where they operate, is I think a lot of rental owners used to think more like rehabbers, like I want to be able to buy it at a certain percentage of the after repaired value. But there's this whole new crop now that doesn't care about after repaired value or anything. They just care about kind of a cash on cash return or some multiple of rent or something else. And if you don't know how they're evaluating a property, then you're either asking too much or leaving money on the table, right?
Yeah, and that's a big problem too, because if you don't understand like gross rental yields and how that landlord is thinking,
right,
at times you'll sell stuff too cheaply. And I see this a lot of times with short sales, where you go back and forth and something happens, or there's liens or whatever, and the closing gets delayed by 6 months. In that 6-month period, prices have gone up a lot. And, maybe you bought a house for 100, think you could sell it for 110, but now you look at pricing and maybe you can get 130 for it. So you got to be aware of the pricing in the market and what the buyers are paying. And also, each person has their own unique situation. Some people have a full-time job, they got great credit, and they got a great W-2, and they're real easy to qualify. So for those guys, if they buy just a little cheap and they fix up the house and then they refinance and pull their cash out, they can just do it again and again and again till they get to 10 houses, which is what I did when I started out. Then for them, like the guy that trained me said, hey, if it's a deal at $37,000, it's a deal at $40,000. In other words, if the market's going up and the house is worth 60 or 70 fixed up, don't, argue over that extra $3,000. But for the rehabber who's actually going to come in and fix and flip that property, let's say with a hard money loan, well, now his numbers really need to line up, because if he's not careful and his repairs go a little higher than anticipated and the property sits on the market a little too long and maybe sells for a little less than he thought, he can very quickly go from a profit to a loss.
Right.
So the personal situation of the individual, is key as well. I always say to people, hey, if you don't have a lot of time and you've got great credit and you've got a job and good income, your best strategy is just find properties to fix, rent, and refinance. But if you've got tons of time on your hands, you're unemployed, you're not making any money, and you're looking for a new career path, then wholesaling might be good for you because you can go out there and find properties for rehabbers and landlords, And some people take to wholesaling. They enjoy it, they like it, and they learn how to wholesale 10, 15, 20 properties a month. You can make a very good living doing that too.
Yeah. I think, I know you teach a lot of people. What do you, if I want to talk about a situation, you just kind of alluded to it, is that if you think of, I think of like I call it the real estate investing supply chain. So you think of like, hey, the guy at the bottom, just like somebody that's making, shoes for Nike, they're kind of buying raw materials. They're doing the extra work to kind of bring it to a retailer, right? They kind of get it all ready and then they sell them to, Athlete's Foot or something like that, where they're going to sell them on. I think a lot of people that want to get into real estate investing, they think they need to go all the way to the bottom and be a wholesaler. And we kind of agree, I agree with you for sure that you need to understand that, and that's the basis of real estate investing. But sometimes they don't realize, well, hey, I would say that's the hardest part of the business, I think, is finding the deals, right? You've got to advertise, you've got to grind out a whole bunch of offers, and maybe sitting on couches with dozens of people to get one deal. And there's value in that. And so there's always the people that just like, I don't want to deal with any of that. I'll just want to buy from wholesalers and I'll pay their markup, different than the Athlete's Foot is willing to pay a markup to Nike and a distributor and a whole bunch of other people that are kind of downstream from that. But what kind of advice would you give to people that don't have that time? They don't want to spend money on advertising. They don't want to have to talk to a million people to get one deal. They want to just kind of go straight there, just to kind of psychologically tell them that you should be willing to pay a little bit more for a house because they added value for you.
Right. Well, I would say, obviously, first of all, the market ebbs and flows. So depending on where you're at, inventory 2009 and 10 is not the same, let's say, as inventory today. But what I would say is this, is that everyone's chasing the same product. Everybody wants a house that they can buy at 65 cents on the dollar, that's in move-in condition, needs no work, and is in a great neighborhood. And while that's great, if you can find it, the reality is that it's almost impossible to find.
Yeah.
At the same time, you've got perfectly good rental properties in lower income neighborhoods that are very difficult to sell for owners because this is not the kind of property a first-time home buyer is going to buy, because in those neighborhoods no one can qualify for a loan. And the only one they can sell to is an investor. And another investor who's savvy is going to want a deal. So they're kind of hard to get out of. And a lot of times their price relative to their rental yield is quite amazing.
Sure.
There's, Realty Track did a report earlier this year. There's some cities that have 25% gross rental yields, 20%, 18%, so you can do real well. We do, up in a town called Fort Pierce, we routinely buy houses for $35,000, $40,000 that rent for $900 a month. And I just cannot understand why more people wouldn't just want to do that. Just buy a house like that for $40,000, put a tenant in there, go to the bank, get it appraised at 60, 70, refinance it, pay off the loan. You've got a house with no money down, and move on. So you don't have to necessarily be the guy out there making offers all day looking for the deals, because a lot of the people that are busy, the doctors and dentists of the world, they have jobs. They got to go to work every day. They don't have time to spend all day sitting on a computer bidding on properties or calling listing agents to try get an REO or short sale. That's why wholesalers actually fill a need, because those cash investors actually need somebody to go out there and find those deals for them. And their trick, of course, is everyone's trying to get into wholesaling, but a lot of the beginners, while they might go and read a book or a course or attend a seminar, they won't really take the time to understand the values in a specific neighborhood, what's a good deal versus a bad deal, how much it would cost to fix up that property. And it's really not rocket science. It's actually quite basic, compared to, I used to be in stocks before I got into real estate. Now that is rocket science. It's much more complicated, but this is real easy. You can go to Home Depot, you can walk aisle by aisle, you can say that tile is 69 cents a square foot, and I got a 1,000 square foot house at $690, and I can pay a guy $1.25 a foot to lay tile, and boom, that's $2,000 to put tile in this house.
Right.
So you can really calculate quite easily what tile and drywall, a kitchen and painting, and so you can really come up pretty easily with a good idea of your repairs. And if you've got good comparable sales, you know what the house is worth fixed up, and you just run your numbers, and there needs to be enough of a spread there for you to make a profit. And if your numbers are right, there's no reason a rehab or a landlord would not buy their property from you.
Right. Thanks for joining us up to this point in the show. The second half of our show is restricted to only FlipNerd Pro and Elite members, and only accessible on FlipNerd.com. If you're not a Pro or Elite member yet, you can upgrade your account in about 1 minute by visiting FlipNerd.com/upgrade. Depending on membership level, you'll get access to off-market properties real time, including real-time email and text alerts for new properties listed in your market. You'll get access to hundreds of full-length expert interviews, and Elite members get access to the FlipNerd Lab, which includes detailed masterclass trainings, 2 live webinars a month where you can interact with the leaders in the industry, and access to our Elite Mastermind group, where you can interact with hundreds of the top real estate investors in America. Build relationships with those that are actually operating successful real estate investing businesses. By visiting FlipNerd.com/upgrade, you'll learn much more about our membership options. And once you've upgraded your membership, come on back and listen to the rest of this show.